get clarity on for ourselves are the words ceremony, ritual, and circle. So you can think of this as a spectrum of all the different ways that we can work with cacao in a sacred way. Okay, so obviously we can just have cacao as a smoothie, a chocolate bar. That's not the sacred work with cacao, but this training is designed to give you the activation into the sacred work with cacao. So at the one end of the spectrum, I'm going to suggest the word we use here is a circle. Sometimes we say a sitting with cacao. And this would be, for example, if I want to have a drink of cacao, and I'm still acknowledging there's a spirit in there, and it's still a beautiful moment for me making the cacao, but I'm going to then have a yoga practice, a breathwork practice. I'm going to serve it to my women's circle, for example. If I'm having some friends over and we have some cacao together and we have a little moment, so with your partner at home or kids even. So this would obviously be shorter in time, the actual work with cacao, and it's kind of to think about it as a support to whatever the other part is that you are going to be doing. So the other modality or the other activity or the meditation that you're going to be doing, okay? And look, this is a spectrum and there's a lot of grayness here. I'm just trying to give a little bit of suggestion on how to think about this. On the other side of the spectrum would be the most sacred and the longest way that we can work with cacao in terms of time. And this is ceremony. Ceremony is definitely not just 10 minutes drinking cacao and that's it. Ceremony involves, for those of you doing level 2, this is what we go into of how to create a ceremony. What are the components involved? And it definitely involves, at the very least, an opening of a sacred space, a bridge or a portal into the unseen space of spirit. And at the end of that, it's a closing off of that space. And there's ways that we can do this that's very energetically sound. And there's certain things that we can work through in that ceremonial space that are just going to be very conducive for the flow of the energy there. And it's going to be in the most respectful and beneficial way for us as humans in the spirit space. Okay, so that's on the one hand, that's ceremony. And what we're going to be learning in level 2 is not anything to do with a particular lineage or a tradition. So those of you who have maybe trained or have heard about shamanic practices, absolutely, you could be working with cacao in that way. But again, that's outside the scope of this training. I'm going to be suggesting a nice sound structure to be able to open up a sacred space, to work with cacao within that, as well as other things, and then close off the sacred space. Okay, and there's quite a lot here. There's quite a lot here. Hence why it can't just be 10 minutes. It can't just be an hour. It can't actually be anything shorter than, well, we're gonna go into that. All right. You'll see that we have our online ceremony coming up next weekend. That, for online purposes, I've found a 90-minute sweet spot. I still think it's a little short, but it does serve to meet all the purposes of how I've been called to work with cacao in a sacred way in the online space. In person, I really struggle with anything shorter than 2.5 hours personally. I just feel there's just so much there to work with and to support the people, the spirit space, all of that, to weave it together, that a longer time is needed. All right. So you can now see there's quite a difference between just having a nice drink of cacao and having a sacred moment with another person, with yourself, with a practice like yoga or nature walk or whatever, and an actual ceremony. Ceremony takes a lot of planning. There's a consideration of the energy container of that particular context of the day or the cycle, the season, whatever it is. There's a purpose for it. Whereas the drinking of cacao for the nature walk or the meditation or the yoga practice, anywhere, anytime, serves its purpose. Okay, so kind of a lighter working with cacao and then a really deep, longer, slower process with cacao. Obviously, the integration here would be a lot different, right? This might just be 2-3 minutes at the very least. A few breaths, okay, stand up, stretch, let's carry on with our day. Ceremony, there might be days or even weeks of integration afterwards and preparation beforehand, both for the facilitator and the participants. Okay, so here's a big difference. Now, it's a circle and ceremony. Then the word ritual. Now, this is very gray, because I know also that there's sometimes a ceremony where people are talking about ritual. There are rituals in a ceremony. The opening of a sacred space in itself involves many rituals, the same as the closing of a sacred space. When we are guided to drink our cacao, so you'll experience this in the ceremony next weekend, I'm going to take you through a drinking ritual with cacao. So there are these multiple rituals that kind of all work together to compose the greatest ceremony. It's like all the musical instruments in an orchestra are all the rituals, and the orchestra itself is the ceremony. And participants coming into that space, there's a preparation of booking their tickets, of getting dressed up, of arriving to the concert, and then afterwards traveling back home, taking their clothes off, showering. So it's a similar kind of thing. There's an occasion. And then ritual can be somewhere between the two. It's still honoring the sacredness of cacao, of course. This is what I have been referring to all the time with your home practice. Make a ritual drink of cacao. So just that word ritual should already switch your brain into, okay, it's sacred. But just know that yet in this training, some of you already might have ceremonial experience or ceremony experience, but so far in this training, we haven't done a ceremony yet. We haven't partaken or performed a ceremony. And when I say perform, it's not that we're standing there just with feathers in our hair, banging a drum, and there's nothing underneath it. But there's an engagement, there's rituals we have to do for ceremony. So what a ritual might look like, it could be maybe half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour, it could be a good hour. And there's an acknowledgement of the elements for sure in a ritual. So far in the opening of our sessions, I've taken us through a ritual, an opening ritual. Let's light our candle together. Let's have a prayer. Let's open the space with a prayer of acknowledgement. Let's invoke in what we want, the elements, the directions. So this will become more clear as we go in the training, but that's definitely what we're going to be using as the foundation going forwards. Speaking of the foundation and the earth element. And of course, Ish Cacao, the spirit of cacao. She's the main focus here. So we're going to be invoking her in our rituals. But a ritual isn't necessarily a ceremony. So you can think of a ritual being a lighter version of that sacredness of ceremony or a sacred space. It's still sacred, of course. And it's difficult. I'm trying to be very mindful of my language here because it's difficult to explain this in a linear way. When we're working with the space of spirit, it's beyond the linear, it's beyond the cyclical, it's just spirit. Yet we need some kind of a container and a context to understand, to start to understand. So I'm going to say this many times. Learn everything. Let your logical mind, let your egoic space, let the left brain, let all of that be in support to you learning, getting structure, and then unlearn it. Unlearn it and go into your inner essence, your flow, into your spirit. And this might come after the training only. That's fine. It might come 5 years down the line. It might never come. That's fine. Structure is good. We need structure and flow together, yin and the yang, to balance each other. Again, level 2, we go into this a lot more detail and a structure for the learning of this. So this is a suggested journaling or meditation practice. Actually, take these words and just see how they land with you. See if you need to maybe reframe something for yourself. Maybe before you've just been using the word ritual and ceremony kind of interchangeably, and that's fine. That's how it happens out in the world, really. Even in indigenous cultures that work very much with their ceremonial spaces, they'll use the word ritual one day, they'll use the word ceremony the other day. They're actually referring to ceremony the whole time. So this only comes really from the lived experience of being in these spaces and kind of going, okay, if I had to give a word to it, that's what I would say now. And this other thing, if I had to give a word to it, that's what I would say. But what does it actually mean? What's happening behind the words? What's happening in those moments or that time frame that we are together for, whether it's with the people, with the spirits. So this is more for your own exploration as we go. I'm giving this as a basic framework for the language used in this training. It also might be helpful just to be clear for yourself when you see an advert out for cacao ceremony and sound journey. and the allocated time for that entire experience is 1 hour. So I'm just going to reframe that in my head and go, okay, it's probably a circle or a sitting with cacao, especially if they're not invoking in the sacred elements and they're not invoking in the spirit of cacao. It's probably a circle, and the main focus is the sound journey. Then I'm making a more informed decision for myself. Okay, I want to attend that. Rather than going and being so disappointed because you were expecting a ceremony and actually maybe in the beginning also just we stumble along and we figure these things out, right? So maybe this has happened to you in the past and it's fine. It's happened to me many of the times in the past as well. And the people putting those offerings out are not necessarily doing it in a malicious way. They're also ignorant. They also don't know. So there can be an opportunity where we just engage in a conversation with somebody. Oh, interesting. So there's that word that you've used here. Is there a reason why it's that? Because I know it is something else. I'm not saying I'm right, but I want to know from you. How do you see this word ceremony? What does that mean for you? And then everybody will just get on with their lives and things will be sorted out in the space of spirit as well. So don't have to worry what everybody else is doing. We just then know for ourselves, stay in our lane, so to speak, and we just carry on working in our sacred way with cacao. But it just might help as we go out into the world and we see all these cacao ceremonies being advertised that it actually might not be a cacao ceremony. Same thing, we might see ceremonial grade cacao paste on the market, and it might not actually be ceremonial grade cacao paste. So we get into that a little bit more in detail next module. So I'm just going to put that out more